Without financial privacy, the rest of our human rights will be quickly eroded, because if we're not able to speak freely with what we want to buy, who we want to fund, everything else falls apart quickly. But that's only a piece of that puzzle.
What is privacy to you? And how do we start to think about privacy in the digital world?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on something really valuable there, which is that the concept of privacy is so different now than what it used to be before the internet, and really before like the internet became integral to every part of our lives, including the financial parts of our lives. Because if you go back like 50 years, the concept of privacy is just not something people are thinking about actively, because it's a natural state of things. You're generally going to have privacy unless you're choosing to go onto a radio show, unless you're choosing to call someone over the phone. But you're generally going to have privacy in everything you do, because most of what you do is not happening in a digital, always online, always surveilled, always preserved system. So we're having to kind of rethink how this stuff actually works, and actually think consciously about privacy as an individual for the first time, I think, really in the existence of humanity, which sounds a little bigger in scope than maybe it needs to. But I think that's a lot of the reasons why a lot of the problems exist today that they do, because we just haven't really thought about it, and we just let things become how they are without having conscious decisions and in place about what privacy looks like. So really, privacy to me it's very simple. It's just having the choice what data about you exists out there in the ether and what data doesn't exist. It's really just the means to an end. And I think, especially in the privacy space, it can often get overblown and become this thing of where, like, I want privacy for privacy's sake, but that's not actually valuable in and of itself. And a lot of people who dive too deeply into the privacy rabbit hole, like I've done, many people I know have done, it actually ends up becoming something that's harmful to human flourishing and harmful to human freedom, because you limit yourself so much because you're so paranoid and so worried about what could be out there. So it's always this balance. It's really about empowering human freedom, empowering human flourishing in a world where privacy is not the default state anymore. And quite the opposite, surveillance is the default state for most people, unfortunately. So clawing back some of that is really what privacy is today.
Cool. Oh my gosh, what an awesome conversation we're going to have today. And so as you talk through that, it strikes me that it's kind of like, if you're too libertarian, you are no longer part of any tribe whatsoever. And there exists extreme risk when you go completely solo. And perhaps it's similar when it comes to the privacy rabbit hole. It's like, if you're just too private, then you're going to really struggle to survive. What I'd love to understand, Seth, is, like, how did you even become interested in this as a subject? And what happened to you that you were like, whoa, this is actually a pretty big deal that I want to spend a lot of time thinking about?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because you started off asking about this concept of physical cash, digital cash, peer-to-peer cash. That's really actually how I got into privacy. I didn't care at all about personal privacy. My background is all in IT and cybersecurity, which cybersecurity is kind of the opposite of, of digital privacy, because my job as a cybersecurity engineer was essentially surveilling other people. Now, obviously, in a business setting on business computers, it's different than your personal data, your personal conversations. But that's really my background. And what changed that for me was actually that when I got into cryptocurrency, I got into Bitcoin. Like many people, I just got into it for the never go up. I just wanted to make more money. It seemed like a good kind of penny stock sort of thing as I was starting out my career. And what actually made it click was I got into Monero, which is a privacy-centric cryptocurrency, because I wanted to be able to mine it with GPUs at home. It's just like a really cool tech hobby thing. I'm a tech enthusiast at heart. And once I got embedded into that community, it became very clear to me that there's something else here. Like, this isn't just about making money. There's actually some human good that can come from this stuff. And getting deeper and deeper into the Monero community, it being a privacy-centric, privacy by default cryptocurrency, necessarily a lot of the community are very privacy conscious. And just in conversations with people, I just finally started to understand, like, financial privacy matters, but that's only a small piece of the puzzle. Like, a broader personal privacy is necessary for human freedom, and financial privacy is a critical aspect of that. I think without financial privacy, the rest of our human rights will be quickly eroded, because if we're not able to speak freely with what we want to buy, who we want to fund, everything else falls apart quickly, but that's only a piece of that puzzle. And so that actually what started me down that rabbit hole of personal privacy was that community kind of being like, hey, like there's more to it than this. And then I did what I think is becoming a little bit more normal route. I kind of fell down the Snowden rabbit hole. I hadn't kept up with what he had unveiled in 2011. I hadn't kept up with a lot of what had happened over the few years after that, but read what was his latest book at the time. This was 2019, I think. Read a few books by Glenn Greenwald, who had been instrumental in that process as well, and just started to understand the broader issues at stake. And at the same time, understanding that the system I was working in the cybersecurity world was often complicit, or at least being very much used by governments to break down the privacy, to break down the choices that we had. So it was a very quick rabbit hole dive for me that started with just wanting to make money, and then finally realizing like, hey, there's actually so much more to this technology than just gaining more fiat at the end of the day, gaining more dollars. There's something that can really be a critical good for human flourishing here.
Yeah, I love the phrase "came for the gains, stayed for the revolution," and
yeah, it's a good one.
It's so true, and I'm very similar in that sense of like hunting for places to earn returns as an investor, and then suddenly realizing that Bitcoin's probably the best investment you've ever made.